Scary Sibs.
And I am Scary Bro. And we are the
Run, shit ghost!
You're not a part of this. I told you to get out.
Okay.
All the way. And we are the Scary Sibs.
Hello, mortals, and welcome to Scary Sibs.
Summer is in full swing, and I don't know about you, but there's only one genre that comes to mind when I think of camping, fun in the sun, and boating on the lake.
Giant slug movies.
Yes, sister, giant slug movies. Ignoramus. No, slasher films.
For those unfamiliar with what we are specifically referring to, slasher films can be generally categorized by the use of a typically masked villain harassing and murdering a group of people. This subgenre began in the mid-1900s and has remained a popular one amongst horror fans throughout the course of the 20th and 21st centuries.
These films are effective in that, while a few lean on the supernatural side, the majority showcase a very human monster that is believable and can actually exist.
Yes, very poetic, brother. Note, I should tell you viewers that thanks to Brother, we have no internet access, thus resorting to watching old VHS tapes of slasher films.
Well, I'm sorry, sister. It's not my fault that the cemetery changed its Wi-Fi password because ghosts kept mooching off of it.
Oh, right. Whoops. My bad. Anyways, here are our picks for the top 10 classic slasher horror films. Seriously, why do I keep trusting you with anything around here? It never ends well for me.
Okay, next time, you can be the one who steals the Wi-Fi. Leave me for everything. Anyways, let's get started with the countdown. Here are the top 10 slasher films. Number 10, A Bay of Blood. After a rich countess is murdered, her estate becomes up for grabs, and several different characters, each claiming to be the rightful owner of the property, show up to collect. However, the murderer may still be looking around, ready to pick off these newcomers, and now it's up to the survivors to try to unravel this mystery before it's too late.
This is a fun movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, and the ending is a huge shocker. The negatives in this film lie in the fact that there are a lot of unnecessary parts that tend to drag on, but at the same time, there are other parts that seem rushed. Also, the acting is terrible, and there are some plot points that simply do not make sense.
This was a film that we believe was trying to put a different spin on the whodunit murder mystery, but came up somewhat short in its ambition. Ultimately, it would get overshadowed by other more well-done slasher films.
Number 9. Friday the 13th. Decades after Camp Crystal Lake was shut down due to the drowning death of a child, followed by the brutal murder of 2 camp counselors, a group is prepping to reopen what the locals call Camp Blood. We see the results of this attempt quickly take a turn for the worse, as the counselors are picked off one by one before the camp even has a chance to reopen.
Now, you may be thinking to yourselves, Scary Sibs, you only gave this movie a 4 for memorable villain? But Jason Voorhees is one of the most iconic horror villains of all time. And yes, I agree he is. However, Jason is in fact not the villain in this first movie, and the antagonist who is present is nowhere near as memorable as him. In fact, this entire movie is rough to get through, with its bad acting, awful pacing, and anticlimactic killer reveal.
Jason Voorhees may be a horror icon, and Friday the 13th is a legendary franchise. This inaugural film is anything but iconic.
Number 8, Sleepaway Camp. A boy named Ricky and his cousin Angela, who lost her father and sibling in a tragic accident, go to a popular camp over summer, hoping to have a bit of fun in between school. However, not long after they arrive, a series of strange and gruesome murders throws the entire camp into disarray, as friendships are tested and accusations are made as to who's behind it.
This film is known for its twist ending and shock factor, as well as the fact that it is a classic film from the golden era of slashers. Beyond that, there isn't much merit to give here, as the acting was atrocious, the subject matter was insensitive, the characters were all overwhelmingly unlikable.
This is a movie that lives and dies on its shocker ending, which, while definitely controversial, is the single time in the film it actually managed to scare me, thanks to the face and noise the killer is making in that last shot. Beyond this one scare, though, this movie sadly doesn't have a whole lot going for it.
Number 7. Black Christmas. This movie shows a college sorority house around Christmas. The girls are continuously getting very strange calls that range from deep breathing to vulgar insults to multiple voices being used. These phone calls are very uncomfortable and off putting as a viewer. We also see several girls lose their life to this killer prior to the reveal of the killer's identity. We watch as the girls and the police try to hunt down this killer before it is too late.
We talked about this film a bit in our Christmas horror movies video, and I feel we were a bit harsh on it there. On second viewing, however, I actually found this movie to be quite effective. The same problems still exist, but with the arguably brainless characters and the frustrating plot holes that keep this movie out of the top half of this list. However, the enigmatic presence of the killer, the violence of the kills, and the overwhelming sense of dread still make this a far scarier and more effective movie than we'd previously given it credit for.
Yes, if you are looking for a good scare around the holidays, this movie will scratch that itch in the somewhat barren landscape of actually decent Yuletide horror.
Number 6. Child's Play. A serial killer running from the cops and bleeding out from a gunshot wound casts a spell to transfer his soul into a doll, which ends up in the hands of a young boy named Andy. Shortly after taking the doll, called Chucky, home, Andy and his mother begin to notice very strange and scary things happening, including unexplainable deaths, all of which may be linked to the doll.
Chucky is definitely a memorable villain, and this film surely has its creepy moments, especially if you have a doll fear. However, this film is very flawed in many ways, and the acting is nothing to write home about. The franchise is very well known and loved, but it is not exactly nightmare fuel.
Now, don't get us wrong, this film is a good start to what would become a long-running horror comedy franchise. It might not exactly make you afraid of dolls, but nonetheless, it's still a fun, violent time.
Number 5. The Prowler. This film starts in 1945 when a broken-hearted war veteran murders his ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend. Flash forward, and 35 years later, the same villain returns to the same town and starts murdering the teenagers there. A college student, Pam, and her deputy boyfriend, Mark, are trying to track down this masked menace and stop him before it is too late.
This movie has a good amount of suspense to it, and I do enjoy our villain's sympathetic backstory of being betrayed by his lover after coming back from war. However, what I don't like is the wasted potential. The idea of a killer soldier would actually make it a very intriguing horror film, but they don't do anything with it. The Prowler mainly kills with a pitchfork, which is very random and out of place. If you're gonna have a killer soldier, make him set traps and kill people with landmines, skewer them with bayonets, and take advantage of your killer's theme.
This film is good, but very memorable. It is mid through and through.
Number 4. A Nightmare on Elm Street. A group of teenagers on Elm Street are haunted in their dreams by a terrifying figure named Freddy, who has the power to kill them in their sleep. The surviving teens are now forced to figure out a way to stop Freddy and avoid falling asleep while doing so.
Summed up, this film is terrifying. It is bound to cause a lot of real nightmares because the idea of something haunting your dreams and killing you in real life anytime you fall asleep is quite horrifying. This film launched an entire series that is very memorable and still very popular today. You have to give credit where credit is due, and it is certainly due here. The criticisms I have, however, lie in mid-acting, over-the-top, almost comical kills, and an ending that is confusing and unsatisfactory.
While this first outing may be divisive, no one can deny it created a true horror icon in Freddy Krueger and made an entire generation of horror fans afraid to close their eyes at night.
Number 3. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie follows a group of friends who are traveling across the state of Texas to visit a house owned by the late father of two of the friends. The group is having a normal, decent trip until the driver makes the poor decision to pick up a hitchhiker on the side of the road. This guy is super creepy, weird, and just makes the whole scene super uncomfortable from the beginning. From here, the friends are catapulted into a downward spiral of terror at the hands of a cannibalistic family and their skin mask wearing enforcer, Leatherface.
This movie entered a bit higher into our estimation this time around. We've already looked over it some in our originals versus remakes list, where we crowned the 2003 remake the superior film between the two. While we still hold that estimation, we found this movie got quite a bit better on a second viewing. Our expectations tempered this time around. We found this film a tense, uncomfortable experience that, while not taking full advantage of its concept by holding back on the, well, chainsaw massacring, it still manages to be a horrifying time.
The toxic atmosphere and the vibe of not knowing who to trust is definitely something that will stick with you as a viewer.
Number 2. Halloween. This classic of the genre follows Michael Myers, a man sent to an insane asylum for murdering his sister when he was a boy. After managing to escape the asylum, Myers returns to his hometown of Haddonfield to resume his killing spree, and places a group of high schoolers firmly in his crosshairs.
So let's start with the negatives, seeing as there are not many of them. The acting by some characters is flawed, and there are some weird camera angles and maybe a few plot points that don't add up, such as how Michael is able to drive when he's been locked up since childhood. Other than these nitpicks, this movie is excellent. It proves that simple is scary. It does not rely on over-the-top kills and gore. The music is only just a few notes, yet is memorable and terrifying. And Michael is one of the more grounded slashers that proves to be one of the most memorable.
This film is a classic for a reason, and has stood the test of time as being one of the all-time greats of the genre. However, we feel that it just slightly got nudged out of the top spot by one more great classic.
And number 1 is Psycho. After taking money from her employer, a woman named Marion takes off with the cash and a suitcase. As Marion is driving one night in the dark and the rain, she gets diverted from the main road, where she decides to stop at the small and very vacant Bates Motel. She is greeted by a charming yet quirky man named Norman Bates, who seems as though he just needs someone to talk to. Marion does overhear Norman arguing with his mother, who does not seem as excited about her arrival. As the night goes on, Marion learns the dark truth about Norman and his mother, and it may be too late to escape with her life.
This movie came out near the tail end of the black and white classic era, and as such maintains a similar level of quality. The fact that it was directed by horror legend Alfred Hitchcock doesn't hurt either. Everything in this movie, from the acting to the slow creeping tension to the final shocker twist at the end, are expertly done. Now, the movie does take a bit of time to actually get to the horror, but the interesting and well-acted characters make this a small nitpick.
This is a timeless marvelous film, and it is no surprise that it is ranked as our #1 pick.
And that was our list of our top 10 classic slasher films.
Do you agree or disagree with any of our picks? Let us know in the comments. Hopefully, we will have internet again before next month. Check and see if the Wi-Fi is showing up, please.
No, I just checked it and it's still got a lock on it. But I did find something very useful to us.
What's that?
Sheet Ghost cell phone. He dropped it not long after I killed him. And I finally managed to brute force his hotspot password, so we can just use that.
Works for me. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time. Until then, I am Scary Sis.
And I am Scary Bro, and we are the Scary Sibs.
You know, brother, we really ought to return that.
Why?
Because it is not right to just take Sheet Ghost stuff like that.
Sister, I would say that that's a pretty hot take. You better save that opinion for next month.